the world's fourth largest economy now and is projected to become the world's third largest economy by 2028. I am joined by senior economist Jayant Krishna, senior economist Mitali Nikor, and senior business economist Sanchita Mukherjee. Thank you all for your time. To begin with, what to your mind, Jayant Krishna, are the factors that have contributed most to India's growth and this current trajectory and pace that we are witnessing?
I think if you look at last 10, 11 years, I think, the services sector has contributed the most to the growth. And agriculture also, which used to grow at around 2% per annum, has shown an average growth of 3 to 4%, which is much higher than what it used to be. So I think that is the case. But if you look at the longer trajectory of last 3 decades or so, then I would again attribute this to the economic reforms of 1991, which liberalized the economy, and lots of changes were made. And since then, there has been no looking back. And last 33 years of economic reforms have seen an average growth rate of about 7 to 8% per annum. I mean, if you keep aside the COVID years and so on and so forth, I think, which is very, very encouraging. So I think those reforms, then some of the second generation reforms also happened in the country, which have contributed. And in the last 10, 11 years, I think what I admire the most is the velocity of decision making. Even the capability to take gutsy decisions, difficult decisions, has been good. Share some of the reforms, like the introduction of GST itself. I think these have been the factors which have really contributed to the growth in the last few years.
Right, Mitali, do you agree? And what to your mind are the key factors that have contributed to this growth?
So I think, Sakshi, it's of course, sir is very right that the velocity of decision making has a lot to do with it, because at the end of the day there was a period of policy paralysis. But I also think that there has been such a massive focus on some fundamental factors. I think we all might remember 2014 when the Prime Minister was elected for the first time. One of his first policy announcements was around Swachh Bharat and the fact that India needs to clean up, and we need to have a focus on sanitation. We need to have a focus even on social sectors. And I think we often talk about manufacturing, and that's absolutely right, because make in India and then the production linked incentive schemes, and now the focus on logistics sector, all of that together has of course contributed to creating a very vibrant manufacturing ecosystem, which has helped in creating a lot of jobs and a lot of inclusive jobs even for women. But at the same time, just this back to fundamentals approach, that we have to build toilets, those toilets have to be functional, we have to relook at agriculture, we have to relook at crop insurance. The PM Fasal Yojana, the Fasal Bima Yojana, came out in 2016, and those rewards are coming out today. So I think the fact that there was such a big focus, of course, on manufacturing, but also on the social sector fundamentals, on agriculture, at least to the extent possible, I think that has helped in creating more broad based growth. And what I want to really point out is, of course, the IT sector was doing well. The IT sector has been doing well for the last 3 decades. But the one thing which has changed in the last 10 years is that the fruits of that IT sector's growth have gone to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. Because the kids and the youth who are coming from these cities are today working in the IT sector. They are not only aspiring, but they're able to get the education and skills that are requisite for entering the IT sector and for working in the IT sector. And not only IT, of course, we've seen a lot of buoyancy in the finance sector. I know Sanchita will talk about it more, and in the banking as well. And these are industries which are fundamental industries, which pre 1991 simply didn't exist. Then 1991 to 2011 and 2011 to 2021 started showing some growth, but from 2011 to 21 is really the period in which we saw a lot of these services sectors simply just take off. So
Right.
that's what has really taken us to this point. So it's a long process. It's not just about 5 years, but it's about a longer set of investments that have happened.
Absolutely. It's been a long process. And of course, India has achieved this huge milestone of now being the world's fourth largest economy. Sanchita, do you agree with these factors? And what, to your mind, are the key factors or the key industries that have contributed most to this growth?
I love the fact that you use the words huge milestone because it is, for our generation, given that Japan is such a colossus megamoth of a economy, I mean, it is quite unbelievable when we were children that we ever thought that India could ever, in your wildest of dreams, even in nominal terms, take over Japan as an economy. So definitely, it is a huge milestone indeed, and India has done that with sheer GDP growth numbers. But I would like to quote what Anand Mahindra said a few days back, that it is definitely a point of a celebration, but we need to be as a country keep dissatisfied, because there's so much more we can do. We cannot just think of these headline numbers as the way forward, because let's understand, last couple of years, I totally agree with what Jen sir, what Mitali was just saying. We have seen tremendous reforms coming into play, not just in IT or services per se, but in manufacturing, in infrastructure development, in opening up all the supply chain bottlenecks. We used to be a very high inflation country. At one point in time, I do remember it was 8-9%. I mean, today, look at us. We're one of the lowest inflation. Why? Because we have opened up the supply chain bottlenecks in the economy, had massive inflows into infrastructure, have looked at various sectors. I mean, think about it. India is possibly the largest digitized country in the world. I mean, UPI, the biggest payment mechanism, the financial inclusivity that it has brought to right to the hinterlands. There's a possibly a man sitting on top of the Himalayas. He's able to use his phone to make a beam payment. I mean, that is the reach of the digitization and the financial inclusivity that India's had in the last decade. So that is tremendous. But having said that, India's development has been very K-shaped, because there's a lot of talk right now going in terms of, yes, our headline numbers are screaming that we have done well, but what about the per capita GDP growth, the per capita income of the citizen of India? That also has increased in the last 10 years from, say, $1,400 to $2,500, $3,000 as recorded by IMF, but that's really low. It is much lower than a lot of African nations put together and all of that. So we really need to understand how we can address a more inclusive growth, such that the per capita income of the common man becomes more relevant, and the quality of life is actually addressed. I mean, in terms of the Human Development Index and all of that. So that is something that I think needs to be looked at. But it is, I mean, we are not even talking about the Viksit Bharat plan of the government. I mean, if one were to look at the blueprint of the Viksit Bharat plan, on which even the simultaneous budgets have been designed upon, it's tremendous, because it does talk about electrification needs of India, the power, reforms in that. See, as and when we are growing as an economy, these are all factors which come into play one by one. Are we electrified? What about our water resources? What about our natural resources? How are we adept at addressing the climate change? 42% of our population is still in agriculture, which is 16% of the GDP. How are we addressing that? How are we addressing undisguised unemployment? Things like that. So I think the Viksit Bharat blueprint is a great blueprint to go ahead and achieve meaningful GDP growth, going down to the lowest common denominator, every common man and citizen.
Absolutely, Sanchita. Jayant, Krishna, do you agree? Of course, this is a huge milestone, but of course, there are areas to address. So, to your mind, really, what are the challenges that India's economy is facing at the moment?
See, Sakshi, I would feel that if you look at the overseas investors into the country, the investors could be purely in financial terms, or it could be in terms of manufacturing or service sector industry. They expect some kind of a regulatory certainty happening in the country, in the sense the regulatory regime under which they take a decision to invest in India should not change materially while their investments are taking shape. I think that's very important. So I think a few reforms which are very, very important, which need to be taken up now, if we have to take a quantum leap now onwards. I mean, for most sectors like insurance, like banking, like real estate, power sec generation. These sectors have regulators in the country. But the members in the regulatory board are invariably appointed by the government. So how independent those regulators are? I think we need to transform those regulators if we want, the overseas investors to have faith in the regulation system in the country. Now, second is, the legal system for enforcement of contract in the country is not as strong as one would like it to be. So I think a lot of changes are required on that front. Rejig trade policies with the major nations. I'm happy that a free trade agreement has happened with Australia. It has happened with the UK. Now, I think, bilateral trade agreement is under discussion with the US, under an era of, trade war, which seems to be happening all over the world. And even with the European Union. So I think with US and European Union, we need to close FTA or near equivalent FTA in the form of a bilateral trade agreement. That's very, very important because with major economies, we must improve our enhance our exports as well as manage imports well. Other factor to my mind is the disinvestment. Air India was a very, very good example, but I think we really need to fast track disinvestments in the country. See, government has no business to be in business. So a lot of areas which post independence where public sectors were set up, because at that time the private sector worth the name didn't exist, that may have been a compulsion. But today government has to have a fundamental relook. Do public sector need to be there in that space? So I think a fast tracking disinvestment is very, very important. And also some headway has been made for direct tax code, but I think a more full-blown implementation of a direct tax code is very, very important to my mind. And through a prism of timelessness, I maybe keep saying this time and again, but land reforms are very, very important, because 2013 land reform that happened in the country, it made land acquisition very difficult as well as very expensive for industry. So I think that needs to be eased out. I know it is a very, very difficult subject politically for any government to touch, but I think one has to look at even labor reforms. Some headway again happened where all federal labor laws were classified into 5 categories. But let me tell you, industry is actually set up in a state, and labor laws are a concurrent subject, and more and more reforms have to happen at the state level, because day-to-day interaction that the industry has is not with the central government but with the state government. So I think reforms there are very, very important. So I would think MSME reforms, the more you do, the more seems to remain to be done. So I think during COVID, some worthwhile reforms for MSME sector happened, but we really need to fast track that. So I think these things, to my mind, are very, very important, going forward. And I think, the second or third generation reforms, whatever you may like to call it, but I really, that those have to happen at the speed of thought very, very clearly. If India has to take, having emerged as the 4th largest economy, if we really need to see, 3rd largest we will become, for no fault of India, for no fault of anybody. It will become because of the size of the population, the economic activity the population does, the consumption that happens with 140 crore people. But the fact is, I think taking on there onwards with China and US will really call for not letting any opportunity grow and show huge hunger to attract investments and fast track the reforms as I just talked about.
Okay, all right. Then, of course, you have talked about reforms. Mitali, do you agree? And, of course, what really are the challenges then that India's economy is facing at the moment, and how can we overcome those?
So I think, both Sanchita and Jayan sir have, laid it out very well. I would say that rather than challenges, I think, Sakshi, the focus has to be on creating something which no one else can. And I think that is really where we have to start to dig into our own innovation. We have to start digging into creating something absolutely new and novel, for the world to purchase from us, for the world to work with us. I mean, if we look at the experience of the US and China, I think we should respect both of the second largest and the first largest, I mean, the largest economies. Both of them have created products, services, which have, such utility that countries across the world are purchasing from them. When we look at the technology that comes from the US, when we look at even the fact that your everyday use of an Apple iPhone, the innovation, it may be manufactured in any country, but the innovation was actually happening in the US. The design happened, the thought happened in the US. I mean, it was an American company. Similarly, when we look at China's experience, again, they may have begun as, an arbitrage of costs, right? The manufacturing sector shifting to China in the 1990s when their ascension happened to the WTO was a matter of, okay, we are going to shift our manufacturing to this country. But over time, they have taken that opportunity and created such embedded supply chains across the world. And they have also innovated and created a whole new set of tangible products. So at the end of the day, when we look at, the services side, which is dominated by the US in some ways, and the manufacturing and product side, which is dominated by China, we have to see what is our space in this. What is it that we can create? What is it that we can innovate? And that innovation is what will set us apart, in the whole world. It's not going to be about, oh, like, can I maybe manufacture this product a bit cheaper in India compared to China? No, that's not where our aspiration has to be. Our aspiration has to be to create something, an industry or multiple industries. And now, with climate change, with changes in the trade supply chains, with changes in technology, we have so many opportunities. Can we come up with the next solution to renewable energy, somewhere around solar, somewhere around wind? Can we come up with the next solution to how to deploy artificial intelligence better? I mean, it's one thing to design the models, but to actually apply them in various industries, be it news, be it corporate sector, be it manufacturing, be it digital manufacturing, can we be the ones to come up with that solution? So, there are so many ideas. And also, can we harness the power of our youth? Because even in industries like the care economy is something which is completely under exploited across the world. There are going to be aging populations. There are also so many children. Indians are and Indian women have been working on care unpaid for so many decades. Going forward, can they be the innovators of, coming in with the most, the best care facilities in the world? So I'm just saying that there are so many industries that we could be, dominating. And I think that is what will set us apart. It's one thing to become the third or fourth largest economy. The second thing is to hold on to that, hold on to that. And we have to not only hold on to that, but we have to thrive in it. So I think this is where, even in agriculture, for example, we can have so much innovation in green agriculture, which can be done in India because we have the requisite climatic conditions here for innovation to create the next set of, crops which are resistant to heat. So, there is so much innovation that we can have through the current set of, conditions. But we have to harness that innovation.
Absolutely. Time for more reforms, more innovations, Sanchita. Do you agree? And what, to your mind, are the key hurdles or challenges that India's economy is facing at the moment?
Yes, loved the way Jen said and Mitali just summarized. I'll just summarize it very quickly. Complete agreement with whatever's been said. I think the biggest challenge we have in today's date is that we are not energy sufficient, right? I'll add on to the innovation point in a bit. We need to be energy sufficient. We are constantly at the mercy of oil. And I think investment is something that even the current government is looking at in terms of alternatives, very speedy development in making ourselves self-reliant as far as energy is considered, is talked about, because that's a huge need of the hour. India is a very, very diversified economy, and that's one of our plus point. That's saved us from a demographic drag, right? But if we have to talk about manufacturing, services, AI, everything requires a lot of energy, and that is something that we do not have in the current moment. So, power sector reforms, electrification, looking at alternatives is the need of the hour. Now, the second most important point is what she just spoke about, innovation. We really need to now ramp up our act in terms of R&D. We have already proven that R&D investment into defense manufacturing has paid dividends. We are now making indigenous products which are now exported to the rest of the world, right? Similarly, in
Mhm.
pharmaceuticals, we have proven to the rest of the world that India can actually be a pharma factory of the world. So research and development is really required across sectors, across industries, to bring up the next generation. You need not have a situation where you're losing the youth to a brain drain because you're not able to innovate within our country. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Employment, a very, very strong tie up with public and private participation. It can be tax linked, it can be reform linked, but that's again the need of the hour. And what Jen sir just mentioned, I think the ease of business needs to be ramped up on a pronto basis with legal enforcement of contracts. So judicial reforms is something which is very, very crucial in today's date, because this whole regulatory overhang, the fact that contracts are not enforceable, ease of business, red tape. I think if you're able to address this, we can make the next big stride as an economy. Because sector wise, I mean, if one were to look at it, each sector is firing away in today's
Mhm.
date. Be it financial, be it manufacturing, be it real estate, be it IT, be it even adoption of AI, be it all of that. Again, why aren't we putting enough money into R&D? Say, for example, agriculture. Agriculture is so stressed out in today's date. We are at the mercy of the monsoons every season, uh, different types of crops. A lot of R&D can go into this. Again, private public participation, which the government has been doing. I mean, the last 10 years there has been a very, very big overweight heavy lifting done by the government in terms of capex across sectors, and that needs to continue, because only then private sector will follow suit. So yeah, my view.
Absolutely. So, of course, these really are the key areas, of course, that can be looked at. Jayant Krishna, lastly, of course, India is projected to become the world's third largest economy by 2028. But what can we truly do to fast track this?
See, if we grow at a faster pace, vis-a-vis 6.5%, if we grow at 8%, we could perhaps do it a year earlier. We'll become in 2 years' time rather than 3 years' time. We'll outplace Germany, as we have outplaced Japan this year. But I would not like to stop there, Sakshi. I think not the GDP, nominal GDP in absolute terms. What really matters is the per capita GDP, which is very, very important. Which is for India is about $2,880. Whereas for Japan, it is $34,000. It's almost 12 times. Germany, it is 55,900, which is almost 20 times that of India. So if we really want to become a developed nation by the year 2047, when independent India becomes 100-year old, post declaration of independence, I think we need to grow at almost 9% per annum if we have to have a tenfold increase in our per capita income. Not only that, I mean, look at the Human Development Index. It's one thing to outplace Japan, but Japan is 23rd on HDI out of 193 countries, whereas Germany is fifth. Whereas India is 130th. So I think it's very, very important to look at these parameters. And this won't happen unless, I keep saying this time and again, unless we improve our allocation to the education and skill development and healthcare sector, among others. These are very, very important. Today, central government and state governments put together spend almost 2% of our GDP on healthcare. I'm not including the private sector investment. And education is almost 3%, including skill development. I think this needs to, in 2-3 years' time, it needs to become 1.5 times. And by the time this government completes its 5-year term, it should become almost twofold. That's very, very important. Science and technology. I think the other two speakers did mention about innovation. We may have become the fourth largest economy, but is it an economy driven by innovation? See, that won't happen unless the quality of research and development that happens in the country takes a quantum leap. Today, we spend just about 0.7% of our GDP on science and technology, and all G20 countries spend anywhere between 2.5% to 4.5%. I think we need to take a huge leap. Infrastructure sector, also needs to improve, although we are not doing that bad there. We spend about 3.4% of our GDP on infrastructure. I think it needs to go to almost 5%. I think these improvements are very, very important. Otherwise, in absolute terms, have we ever overtaken Japan? We will, in all probability, will overtake Germany in 2 to 3 years' time. But to become a developed nation in the foreseeable future would require the economy, the GDP, to grow at a much faster pace than faster perhaps than the average of last 30 years. And with the reforms that we talked about, and allocations, especially for education, skills, and healthcare sector, and science and technology, have to go up substantially. And in infrastructure development, these allocations have to go up at least by 22% or another. It's about 3.4%. 5% would be good, but on that sector we have done pretty well in last 10 years. So I think this journey is very, very important. We are proud to proud of the fact that India has become the fourth largest economy. But I think we would love to see India as a developed nation by the year 2047, if not earlier. And therefore, there has to be a sense of urgency in whatever we do in the country, and the velocity of decision making, has to be ultra fast. Sakshi.
Absolutely. Mitali, do you agree? And what, to your mind, really India must focus on to become the world's third largest economy way sooner than projected?
So I think, Sakshi, one thing, actually two things I'd like to highlight. The first one is that there's a lot of latent potential in our economy. This latent potential comes from two major demographic groups. The first major demographic group is women. The today itself, I was reading an article, and of course this is related with Nicor Associates research that we've done over the last decade. Women between the ages of 30 to 59, are overwhelmingly out of the workforce even today. Even educated women, postgraduate women, there are many reasons why women fall out of the workforce. We know unpaid care work is one of them. We know the lack of work life balance, flexible work practices, etc., deter women in the organized sector, in the unorganized sector. There's a whole range of challenges. So, this entire focus of enhancing women's labor force participation and ensuring that the talent of these women, the innovation, the ideas that comes from, half of the population is actually harnessed for growth. A few years ago, there were, studies from McKinsey which talked about the fact that if India even invested 2% of its GDP in enhancing support structures for women, and by support structures I mean childcare, I mean elder care, I mean safe cities, investing in infrastructure across cities which enhances gender responsive mobility. I mean, if this was done 10 years ago, we would have added 770 billion to the GDP by 2025. That didn't happen to that extent, but it is now happening. We are working with so many government agencies, and everybody wants to know, okay, how can I make my metro system safer for women? How can I make my bus station safer for women? And these might seem to be small efforts, but they're happening across the country and will have a massive impact on women's labor force participation. So there is this whole aspect of freeing up, half of your country's innovation. The second comes from the youth. And the youth is something which I'm very worried about, because we've discussed this many times, Sakshi, that, there is a skill gap. There is a gap when it comes to analytical thinking. There's a gap when it comes to innovating. There's a gap when it comes to basic writing, even that we are observing. I mean, in my own firm, I've hired more than 1,000 young people in the last, 5 years in different capacities, mostly in as interns, or just young people coming in, and the vacuous absence of analytical thinking really terrifies me, because they are just not thinking. So we really need to invest in skills that will make our youth innovators, because the innovation has to come from the youth, and we have to bring them into the workforce, and we have to link industry and academia, so that the curriculums which are being taught, like sir said, if we have to increase the spending on education, it shouldn't just be about increasing the spending on education, but increasing the spending on curriculums which are highly relevant to the demands of the job market and to the demands of the industry. So I think that is something again where private sector universities have to some extent come and provided some solutions, but we need this to be pan India. So the scale of the scale of the investment required is massive, and I that's why I'm excited, because I know there's a lot of work to do, but these are areas on which we have to work to take us to the next level.
Absolutely. These are areas that we have to work on. Sanchita, your thoughts. What really can India do to become the world's third largest economy way sooner than 2028?
I think that the government needs to have a very serious discussion with the private sector, because if one were to see the trend in the last 10 years, like I just mentioned a few minutes back, the government has been doing the heavy lifting when it comes to investments, public investments into infrastructure, into addressing demand, addressing agriculture, addressing manufacturing, giving out freebies, subsidies, make in India plans, production linked incentives, all of that. Where is the heavy lifting coming from the private sector? They need to put money where the mouth is, in terms of, the tax rates for the private sector has been reduced to 25%, with the intent that private sector will now do the heavy lifting. But we are not seeing it in terms of capex utilization, in setting up new factories, in having a vision for the next 20, 30 years, that yes, I can also be a Fortune 500 company. Which of these companies are setting up mammoth businesses, mammoth employment, mammoth vision that they would be a Fortune 500 company in the world in the next 30 years? We need to see that. It cannot only be a public sector driven approach. I mean, you have companies from abroad who are putting their faith in the demographic demand of India. They are setting up things over here. We need Indian private sector, which is operating at a 25% tax rate, to now do the heavy lifting. That's one way to look at it.
Well, I certainly hope policymakers and the youth are listening to all of you. Thank you so much for decoding the state of the Indian economy for our viewers. Thank you.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.